So the Logan Paul versus KSI, Jake Paul versus Comedy Shorts Gamers, Scarce versus Rocka Rocka, Hey Vsauce versus Michael here fight is in 2 days after this video is supposed to be uploaded, and personally I am very hyped for what might be about to go down in this fight. I don't think I'm alone in saying that I, and many of us as a collective YouTube hive mind abomination, would like to see both the Paul brothers get their shit kicked in, figuratively of course, because this is boxing and there's no kicking in boxing. But before the fight goes down, I wanted to talk some of what I would personally want to see happen in it, and how those wants stack up to what I actually think is going to happen. I also want to talk about some of the new shenanigans that have been happening before this fight, leading up to it, some back and forth between the contestants, and all that interpersonal shit they're doing to try and help promote the fight, get mouth breathers like myself excited for petty drama, you know. Alright, so let's start with the diss tracks, which for some reason have made a very sudden but decently sized unit mildly impressed by the size of this lad of a resurgence since they were at their peak of popularity last year. The first one to drop something that kind of resembled a diss track was Jake Paul, who released a song called Champion. It wasn't really a diss track on Deji, it was more just a song about how Jake Paul punches really good. There was one kind of a shot at Deji, I guess. On Jake's mouthguard, it has Deji, you're a bitch written on it, which is terrifying or something. This message isn't meant for me. Now, most of the verses on this thing are handled by features who are Jit and Quan. They're not the absolute worst, but the kids spitting them, well, are kids. So better than Jake Paul's usual output, I suppose. Now, this track has been getting some praise from around the tube in the form of people saying that the chorus is kind of nice, which I sorta agree with. It's a little hype, it's got some decent delivery.
Bitch, I'm a fucking champion, Bitch, I'm a fucking champion,
That aside, I don't care enough about it to sit through the pre-chorus to get to it. The last thing I'm gonna praise this song on, though, is that Jake Paul once again pulls through with that like-to-dislike ratio. That's the content I like to see from you, Jake. I give Champion a 6 every day, bros, and the 7 in the week. Definitely improvement for Jake. Keep it up, champ. The next person who dropped a diss track was KSI. His was named On Point, and this one was definitely meant to be a diss track, and it clearly had some time put into it because, say what you will about the song itself, the video is really fucking well put together. Like, Jesus, just look at some of this.
I don't deal with that. Pagans all in my way. No. I don't deal with that. Bullshit in your DNA. No. I don't deal with that. Bitches want to come and play.
Now, the song itself is easily KSI's best diss track, which, not saying much, but personally I think his delivery in this style is the strongest it's ever been here. His flow seems like it's improved a lot, but it's still really hard to get over that accent in his voice. The highlight of this whole thing, though, is definitely not the song itself, it's the music video and the references in it. There's some obvious ones, like the one to The Shining and one to Thanos from Infinity War, where KSI is literally wearing the Infinity Gauntlet and he pelvic thrusts Logan Paul's scrawnier stunt double into the Shadow Realm. There's a bunch of Team 10 shit as well, which is mostly just nice little touches. The cover art for the single itself, though, is a Polaroid of just the wig that KSI used at all the press conferences sitting in the woods, which is pretty funny, I guess. Also, Jake Paul made a 5-minute video dedicated to reacting to the KSI diss track on Logan, but the whole video was him stalling out reacting to it, ending on him saying that he wasn't going to react to it. And honestly, Jake, I'm really hurt. I really trusted you on this one, and for that reason, I'm bumping the score of your song down from 6 out of 7 to a 1 out of 7, you big dumb meaty. If I was to rate this song, I'd probably give it a C+ or a B- out of 100. Probably best listened to while you're eating potato skins. Not sure why potato skins specifically, but they just sound like they taste good most of the time, so it's a pretty safe bet they will still taste good while you're listening to the song. The video, though, I would definitely give a 5 melon head ripoffs out of 5, because that's exactly what I'm doing, except I'm infinitely less qualified to talk about this kind of thing than Antoine Fantoine. The next person to upload their song in the diss track chain was Deji, with his song Waste Man. Probably a reference to the one line in Jake Paul's song where he says, Waste Man. Clever. It's Deji's best diss track, which doesn't mean a lot either. I don't really care for one this much. It's not, like, terrible, but it's not, like, up there like KSI's. It's just very forgettable. It's got some pretty direct disses, but the only time I watched it all the way through was when Mini Mitter was reacting to it, so I'm gonna pretend this is a Why You Know review episode and not give this a score at all. And finally, we're at the last diss track that got released, the one by Logan Paul, which was apparently made in 1 to 2 days to try and get it out as a response to KSI's diss track. And from the perspective of those time constraints, it's really well put together for the time frame if that is the case. It's called Goodbye KSI Yada Yada, and it's apparently featuring KSI, which is pretty cool of JJ. Set aside his differences ahead of the fight to make a song with his opponent. Not really. That joke aside, the whole shtick of this song is that Logan Paul uses clips of old KSI saying a bunch of pretty weird shit from back in the day as part of the song.
Bitch, you know you gonna lose. I got one question for you.
Where have you your tits gone.
Yeah, it's kind of clever how they did it. The editing on the video itself is pretty nice, I guess. I'd say for what it is, I'd probably put it on par with KSI's. Mostly because I'm too lazy to make up another fake rating system for the sake of this joke. The Mellow Man can have this one if he wants. Now, another thing has happened recently, where Deji decided to pay Jake Paul a friendly visit ahead of the fight and went to the gym that Jake Paul was at. They were probably talking about whether Digimon or Pokemon was better, which is not something I will be stepping into with my opinions. But for one reason or another, things heated up, things escalated, and Jake Paul did that punching thing he talks about doing really well a lot in that song I was talking about earlier. Except instead of to like a pad or something, it was the face cheek of Comedy Shorts Gamer. Now, according to the Twitter accounts of both Paul brothers, Deji showed up unannounced and Jake slapped him, not punched, so there's that for clarification, I suppose. What I'm more interested in is the sound that got made when Jake touched Deji's cheek and whatever motion that contact happened to be in. It was a very clop-clop noise for me, which makes me think of the noise you might get when throwing putty at a wall. But yeah, it's pretty clear that Deji probably showed up at the Paul's den to try and stir up some mischief, to get some publicity ahead of the fight and get stuff up around it, and I don't really know what else to say about this bit specifically, so yeah, let's move on to the last thing I want to mention before we get into my fight wants and my fight predictions. True Jordy, the guy who Logan Paul said hated his guts and was a biased moderator or whatever, has been releasing episodes of his podcast that have been interviews with the fighters, and he's been covering some pretty interesting stuff in them. The first one was with KSI, the second one was with Logan Paul, and the one he released just yesterday was with Jake Paul. Now, at the time of me recording this, if it exists, an interview with Deji hasn't been released, so I won't be talking about that here because I have no idea what would be said in it or if it even does exist. But in the KSI interview, they went over a lot of stuff in regards to just straight up with the fight and KSI's current headspace amongst all this stuff. It was interesting to hear how he personally thinks things are gonna go, and in short, he's very confident that he'll win and not so confident that his brother will win. So there's that, I suppose. The Logan Paul interview definitely felt a lot more raw to me. It covered a lot of stuff with the suicide fortist. If you remember from back then, True Jordy made a video on that whole thing where he was very critical of Logan's actions at the time. So seeing them talking about the situation one-on-one in person 8 months later gave some very interesting perspective on the whole thing, at least in my opinion. They talked about the fight as well, obviously. They talked about Logan's training, about the interview that Jordy had with KSI the day prior. A lot of interesting stuff in there for sure. And the last one that I've seen thus far was the one on Jake Paul. It's the shortest of the three that have been released by now, and it just covers a bunch of what Jake Paul thinks of Deji ahead of the fight, how confident he is and all that, and just if you have some time before the fight, I'd recommend giving them either a listen or a watch because it is some interesting stuff in my opinion. And finally, let's talk about what I want to happen in the fights and what I think will actually happen in those fights. Starting with the only undercard I care about, the one that Papa Scarce is in. I want him to win really bad, and I have absolutely no idea if he will or not. I just really want him to. Anyways, on to the main two fights, starting with Jake Paul versus Comedy Shorts Gamer. I would love to watch Deji beat Jake Paul so bad. I would love to watch him just dominate, or even if it's a close match, if Deji were to win would be the absolute ideal outcome for me. But, very unfortunately, I do not think that is going to happen. It seems like Deji has some stuff going for him behind the scenes, but I just don't know if he's been taking this as seriously as the rest of the guys. He's at a height, weight, and reach disadvantage to Jake, and even though Jake said he's only had 2 months of total training time, even if Deji has the edge on just raw amount of hours or days put in, I don't know how well spent those hours were in the end of it all. It sucks, but I don't have a lot of confidence in him going into this fight, though I do think there's still a good chance he could pull through, not counting on it though. And his brother doesn't seem to be counting on him too much either, so it's not really helping my thought process too much. I'll definitely still be rooting for him though. Anyways, moving on. The KSI versus Logan Paul fight. I would love to see KSI win this one. Logan Paul is one of my favorite people to make videos on, and not one of my favorite people just as a person. KSI is someone who I've watched for a while, so yeah, I'm biased and I have been since I was like 12, sue me. My thoughts on him as a person have changed a few times over the years, but right now I'd say they're positive. But as far as what I think will happen, I really am not sure on this one. From what I've been seeing, it feels like they could be really close in where they stack up. Like in this case, it's like KSI is coming into the same position that Joe Weller came in his last fight, where his opponent, Logan Paul in this case, much like Jake does on Deji, has the height, weight, and reach advantage. Not to mention he just comes from such a background of athleticism. KSI has more experience in boxing overall at this point, seeing as he's trained for the fight with Joe for months, and now he's been training for this one as well for months, so in that regard it seems like he might have a major leg up on Logan just an amount of experience. But I'm pretty sure Joe had more experience than JJ at the time of their fight too. The biggest difference that I see KSI has coming into this fight in a similar kind of position that Joe was in is that he appears to have so much more confidence than Joe did in that fight. After the fight happened, it came out in one way or another that Joe didn't rise to the occasion as well as he might have been able to, and he caved to pressure ultimately. JJ seems to be so fucking confident going into this, and it's pretty safe to say that the majority, if not the the entirety of the 20,000 person crowd in Manchester Arena is gonna be on his side. Both Logan and Jake have said that they wouldn't let the crowd get to them because they're both used to dealing with that kind of thing online and getting a lot of hate thrown their way, but it's really fucking easy to say that when it's not happening in the moment, so it remains to be seen. But what I think will happen in the Logan Paul versus KSI main event, I really don't know. It just seems so close to me, but I'd probably give the edge to Logan Paul just because of a gut feeling, but all of that remains to be seen. Anyways, if you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to drop a like, and if you're new, subscribe. If you want to comment your fight predictions in the comments below, that would be great. I have a podcast with Wild Spartans and FPS Diesel called Loudmouse. We upload 2 new episodes every week, and we're up on iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube. You can follow me on Twitter at Kwite and on Instagram at Kwite.png. Links to both of those in the description below. And lastly, I have a Discord server as well. Link to that in the description as well if you're interested. Anyways, this has been Kwite, and I will see you guys next time.